Welcome back. Another episode. Very excited about this one. Like always, we're here with pioneers. We're here with builders. We're here with people from Jacksonville. And in our case today, even a little bit of Tampa. I'm here with Nick Padlo. Nick Padlo is the creator, founder, CEO, president, leader of Sophros Recovery. Great story, great organization. Obviously, well-grounded here in Jacksonville, but has been expanding. And we're very excited to talk about the efforts that are being put forth there. Nick, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Man, it's a long time coming for us. We met a little while back, and you shared a little bit about your story, a little bit about how this came to be. And inspiring is a good word. I think anybody who's kind of lost and trying to find purpose in this world will hear your story and probably feel some type of way about it. And I certainly want to share it. So I guess I want to start with Sophros, and then we'll kind of talk into how we got there. But high level overview, we'll start with the Jacksonville chapter of this. What are we doing at Sophros? Who are we serving? Who are we helping?
Yeah, so we are an addiction and mental health treatment center. So anybody struggling with alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be. But a lot of what we do is focus on the mental health too, because there's a reason why we get in that spot. So we treat depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever people are struggling with, PTSD, trauma. And our model is a little different. So instead of going off to rehab for 4 weeks and being, living there, our clients come to us every day and they're with us 3 to 6 hours a day. Presumably the goal is to just build this toolkit of skills so that you can deal with like whatever life throws at you. And the reason I like it being outpatient the way we have it is because you have to leave our place and you got to drive home. And on the way home, you're going to go past 2 liquor stores, 4 gas stations, and maybe your dealer's house, right? And so you got to make a decision to do it differently in the face of all those challenges. And then if that's hard, we're going to talk about it the next day. And if you screw up, we're going to talk about it the next day and we're going to figure out how to do it differently. It's those like live repetitions, those live at bats that you just don't get in a residential treatment center because, it's easy. I mean, I went to rehab twice and there's a place for it, but it's easy to stay sober in rehab when you can't drink or use, right? But where the rubber really hits the road is like when we go back to life. And that's what we try to help people with at Sophros.
Yeah. Obviously, great mission, man, and congratulations. You probably have data on this, but I'm really curious because they come to see you every day and they leave you every day. And a typical rehab program, I'm just throwing numbers out there. Let's say it's 3 months, but they have to stay on site. And then once they get out, they're kind of exposed to this world that's been like pushed down. And so I'm kind of curious about the statistics. Whenever there's repeatability, maybe it kind of it numbs the, seeing something every day, you kind of care less and less and less and less over time versus having it suppressed and then right in your face as soon as you get out. What was the scientific backbone? What was the thought that went into let's do this more outpatient style?
So there's certainly a benefit to detox and residential level of care because sometimes you can't stop using, right? If you can't stop at all, even for a week with someone's help, then you're not quite ready for our level of care. Right. And so that's why residential can be good. But like you said, if you're not picking up the tools and skills and kind of getting everything by the time you leave residential, the world hits you real hard when you get out. And so, the percentage of people that relapse within 24 hours of leaving a detox or residential facility is astronomical. I mean, some of the studies show as high as like 25%, talking about the first 24 hours, first 48 hours. Right. And if you start to look at the first 30 days, that number starts to creep up and up and up. And so, even for people that do go to residential, it's important to work a program after. Shoot, even when you leave our place, you still got to work a program. It just looks a little different. And so the thought process is, let's do this intensive level of care. Let's ramp it down over time as you're building the tools and skills to be able to deal without it, right? But then there's always some like rhythm you've got to have. I mean, I go to 4 meetings a week myself, right? It's because I have to. I talk to my sponsor twice a week because I have to, right? And like, do I think if I didn't for a week, I would relapse? No, I don't think so. But I also want to make sure that I'm keeping like investments in that account. I'm not getting close to like bouncing a check on my sobriety, so to speak, right? You got to keep the balance high. That way there's no issues if something does happen, right? Because life could hit me and I might need to make a big withdrawal from that support that I've built for myself, right? And I've got to have enough in the bank to where I can do that. We see about 65% of the people that start our program finish it, and that's up to them. That's a decision they make. But the people that finish it do great. Do people relapse? Yeah, they do. right? It happens. But oftentimes they come back. And sometimes we need to, we need a refresher, A lot of times people say relapse is a part of recovery. And it has been for me. I have relapsed, right? It doesn't have to be, but for many of us it is. And so really the question is like, what do you do when that happens? Do we get back on it or do we just keep spiraling?
All fair and makes a ton of sense, man. I'm impressed by the different like thinking model of recovery here, because in my mind I'm thinking relapse, you go either back into rehab or you go like full bore down the spiral. And in here, like somebody can leave, have a life moment, relapse, and then be right back out where they need to be the next day to continue treatment. So you've certainly built a model here that is, I think a lot of people are going to be excited to learn more about. And I'd love to hear about maybe the origin story. I'd like to combine that with how, when did we start here in Jacksonville? How did we start? How did we break ground? Maybe you can give us like the runway up into how we opened, and we'll kind of take the conversation from there.
Yeah, so my personal story. So I grew up here in Jacksonville, went to Wolfson for high school, was fortunate to get to go to West Point for undergrad. So I spent my 20s in the Army chasing bad guys in Afghanistan and Iraq. Got out, went to business school at Stanford. Everything was kind of flying high. I was on this track and, had some life stuff hit me. I got a divorce and I had already kind of been using alcohol as a tool a little bit, mostly to, take the edge off a tough day. Right. And we don't think about that as too scary. But at the end of the day, what I'm learning to do is I'm learning to cope with negative emotions with alcohol. Well, when the negative emotions got big, the alcohol consumption got big. Right. That was the tool that I had. That was the tool in my toolkit. And I leaned on it. And it was helpful for a bit until it wasn't anymore, right? And then I developed this dependence. And the other problem that I had was that, my depression was spiraling. I was sad, so I was drinking, but I went from sad to depressed, which is a big difference, right? You can be having grief and being upset, but not be depressed. Well, when you throw alcohol on that fire, it can lead you in that direction real quick. And so I was running a business out of Dallas in pet cremation, actually. But I was running this business and business was going great, but I wasn't. So ended up going to rehab twice in 2018. After that, after the second time, I decided I was going to do things a little differently. So I picked up and I moved to Cambodia for like 3 months and lived at a temple there, just practicing yoga and meditation full time, which was wild, but really cool. Good for me. I mean, who would have thought an Army guy from Jacksonville was going to go over and do that, hippie stuff, right?
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah, it was great for me. I still work with my teacher from there. And so for me, coming back from that experience was right around COVID times. And so I wanted to, I'm taking my personal experience and then putting on my entrepreneur hat. And I'm like, okay, I've been through this. I see what's out there. How do we make this better so that we can help other people who are going through the same stuff I was and that can be successful, potentially without the, good insurance I had. Right. So, we wanted to make it more accessible. We wanted to make it better. And it really seemed like this level of care, this intensive outpatient was the place that was really getting overlooked. There were people doing it, but the level of sophistication and the clinical programming and the, efficacy, the results, what this is all about just wasn't there. And so we set out to redesign that. And I think we've done a really good job.
I mean, I would say so. When did you broke ground here in 21?
21, yeah. So October of 2021, we opened our doors in Jacksonville, with 4 people, and now we've got like 30 in Jacksonville. So it's primarily clinicians, so master's level therapists, but also, nursing team, doctor, all that stuff. And then about a year ago, we launched in Tampa.
I'd say you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, every day we always say one day at a time. That's how we approach our sobriety, and that's how, I look at business.
Yeah. There's a couple of things you talked about, man, I really want to unpack. One, you said you were in the Army. I was in the Navy. And, listen, there are easy days. I'm not going to sit here and say like every day we're at war and we got to drop bombs, and we have off days and we have days where we get to, explore and do things. But I don't want to say we're taught. It's not the case, but there's certainly a community component to in your downtime. There's this big camaraderie effort in the service, but that camaraderie comes with a beer in your hand. And we don't have 2 beers and like, oh, hey guys, this was great. Have a good one. Like we get tanked. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I've always thought, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I've always thought, now we have all this data on what like alcohol abuse and drug abuse and stuff like that can do to your mental psyche. and your overall well-being when we've had the military around since 1775. And so I I'm curious your thoughts on maybe this could be a generational thing, but like how did these guys get out of the service in a decent place, especially going through all these big time wars, man, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, etc. And let's just start there. Just general thoughts, man. Like if we had this information back then, would you think that we would have been able to transform the way that the military views substance abuse in our free time?
I mean, so I think there's kind of this trifecta of problems that happen for us, right? We're a drinking culture, we're a trauma heavy environment, and we're a don't talk about it culture, man up, right? So that combination of I'm having a lot of trauma, or potentially, I'm drinking a lot, and I've been taught, again, not taught explicitly, but the culture has taught me that the way to do these things is to be tough, like tough it out, And so you have this combination that's kind of a perfect storm. And, were the guys that came back from World War I and World War II okay? I don't know. They didn't talk about it, right? And so there might have been a lot more problems back then than we even knew about. And I'm thankful that we are starting to talk about it more. And, I don't know, I've been out of the Army since 2008, so I don't know, if the culture has changed at all. But I will tell you that, we've had a lot of success working with, the naval bases here in town that seem to be very supportive of their active duty service members who are struggling. And I don't remember that back in 2008. So when I was in, what I remember was if somebody's drinking too much, I mean, I was judging them because I wasn't an alcoholic yet. But if somebody's drinking too much, then we need to they're getting in trouble. Like they're a problem child, let's chapter them out. It was never about how do we help this guy, with this problem, because I don't think we saw it that way. Shame on me for not getting it then, but I don't think any of us did.
Well, I can tell you for sure none of us did. And I'll take it a step further. I left NAS Jax in 2018. So 9 years after you got out. And I don't even know that we were even scratching the surface on this conversation yet. So this is obviously fresh. But, they're looking at the data finally and saying, okay, like this has to do with substance abuse, this with PTSD. So we're starting to get brain injuries, mental health and alcoholism, substance abuse, etc. We're able to finally start having these conversations about how the work and the environment have contributed to these ideals, if you will. And I don't know, I'm kind of curious what the next 10 years looks like, but I assume based on the work you're doing, you seem pretty hopeful about it.
I mean, I'm hopeful. I think there's a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of stigma. We've come a long way, and we've still got a long way to go. I think one of the things that the military is just now coming around to is this concept that like substance use and mental health are like inextricably tied, right? You can't, used to be in the civilian world, the civilian world sometimes advances a little faster with the way things move, the speed at which decisions are made. They kind of realize that you can't treat substance use without treating the underlying mental health. And I think we're starting to get there in the military as well. But I think there's still a little bit that thinks of them as discrete problems where it's like, oh, this person's got an alcohol problem. Let me treat that. Let's not drink. And it's like, well, that's nice. But until I fix my depression, until I start to address my trauma, like I'm going to keep going back to it. It's kind of like, trimming weeds in your front yard with scissors.
I hate to laugh at that, but the mental picture is great. You talked about doing work with the bases. Are you working in conjunction with them? Like, is there like a partnership that you're doing with them? Or is this one of those things where you're starting to identify people that are on the base that might be in a transition phase and you're maybe doing more of the outreach? How does that partnership work?
So we've really worked with, sailors who, they have a program similar to ours at NAS. And when that program is full, they'll often refer to us. So we'll be their temporary place of duty while they're in treatment with us, which is nice that you've got like a military, guy like myself in there because I kind of know the rules, right? I know what that means when they don't show up, right? I know what it means when, big Navy needs something. It's like, okay, well, we gotta do this differently. And I think clients can take it a little more from me as well because I have a little bit of credibility when it comes to, my own service. So, it's been good. Obviously I'd like to do it more. I mean, I think we're very well positioned to help, our military folks. And we work with a lot of veterans as well through the VA, relationship there as well.
Yeah, dude, obviously great point. It's something else I want to talk about. You're saying, I think we're doing pretty well. Well, When you become the referring service from a naval air station, from a naval station like Mayport, like the VA, clearly you've put in the work to position yourselves as thought leaders, as people who are commendable, dependable, all these other things. How did that materialize this fast? I mean, you broke ground in 2021. It's only 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about results, right? At the end of the day, our job is to help people get well. You know, people always say stuff like, well, nobody's going to get well if they don't want to, or, they have to do the work. You can't do it for them. Like, these are kind of these like pithy sayings that we have. But the reality is, if we're doing our job and if we are practicing the best clinical modalities and have the best therapists delivering them and like, holding accountability and holding space and also, being tough when we need to, if we're doing all those things right, then we're going to see more people getting well than not getting well. We're going to see better results than someone who's not. And so, my thought is when someone comes into our treatment center, our goal is to help them regain their life. And if they regain their life, they're going to tell people about it. Right. And then, so someone wanders in who's affiliated with one of these organizations, even if it's a, employer here in Jacksonville, like, whatever employer downtown, right? If one of their employees comes and we do a good job with them, then they might say something. If they're willing to talk to their HR, they might say something. Hey, I went there. They did great. I'm doing good now. And they're like, oh, interesting. Can I talk to them? And so I think that's, we treat every client like, that's our sole goal. And if we do a good job, then, the word gets out.
Well, it's gotten out because we're now we're on the other side of the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that happened quick too, right? We opened in 21 in Jackson. In 24, we've got a second center in Tampa. Question is, how did you know that Tampa was a ripe market for that? And how did you know that once you broke ground and built it, that you were going to see similar results in Jacksonville? I mean, you were from here, so I knew you had the relationships, but getting over there and starting this thing from scratch was a risk. I'm kind of curious why you thought that was going to work out.
So I wanted to stay in Florida because our license is in Florida. And so that makes things a lot easier with licensing. So Florida was kind of the next move was going to be in Florida. We do well in population centers because there's just more people that need help. So it kind of limited me to South Florida, Central Florida, or Tampa, really, when I was deciding. South Florida has a big reputation in the treatment space. And it's not a good one. There are a lot of treatment centers. A lot of them are not doing things for the right reasons. And a lot of those folks have very big marketing budgets, so you'd never know. And so South Florida, I was like, we're going to stay away from now. At some point, maybe we'll tackle that beast, but not now. So that left me to Orlando and Tampa, and going into putting my entrepreneurial hat, I'm like, okay, let me look at population density. Let me look at the percentage of military and all these things. And I was like, okay, Tampa seems like a better fit. And I've got a few connections there as well, a few good friends that are kind of in and around the mental health space. And it's been challenging. I would say it hasn't grown as fast as Jacksonville, but it's starting to pick up steam. We're starting to get momentum, which is exciting, but it's hard. And it's, number of reasons. I mean, I don't know if it's because, me and Aaron, my partner in the business, we're not down there either. Right. So it's like, some of these things that you have that helped you get momentum the first time aren't necessarily in place. So you got to think about other things. You got to get creative.
Why were you also like not hell bent, but why did you think it was an appropriate time to expand?
Because Jacksonville was doing well, and my goal in this was always to help as many people as I can. I went to business school out at Stanford, and they're always like, scale to the moon and like, create these giant companies and have 100,000 employees. I don't want to do that anymore. But to say that some of that hasn't rubbed off on me is probably wrong, right? I'm not trying to, make money and then run. What I want to do is like, if the business happens to make money, we reinvest it in the business and we try to grow this to help more people. If that works out well for me in the end, then that's great. But I'm having a great time now. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Is there any like future state thoughts on where you want to go next? Has that even entered your mind yet? Or are you kind of focused on getting Tampa, scaled up close to what Jacksonville's doing?
So we actually already did something else this year.
Oh, okay.
I don't sit still well. So we launched a virtual IOP as well. So now we can service people throughout the state of Florida that aren't, don't have good access to treatment near them, to quality treatment near them. So we launched our virtual about 2 months ago. And we're about to launch a Spanish speaking virtual on March 31st. So a couple of new things in the pipe now. And where we go from there, I don't know. We've certainly built a reputation in Jacksonville for being, one of the best treatment providers in town. And so part of me is trying to think where else we should go, but part of me is also trying to think what else could we provide here to the community of Jacksonville that I know and love, where we can really add value. And I don't know where that is yet, but there's a lot of stuff around us like sober living and adolescent treatment, all that stuff.
So, but you're saying the hamster wheel's turning.
It's always turning. I
Yeah.
wish I could slow it down, but
Fair. Hey, man, this is good stuff, though. I'm curious if anybody's watching. Obviously, like I said, I'm a vet, so I have a pretty good vet following, and so many people. I was having a conversation the other day. So many people don't know what they don't know. Sometimes these feelings that they have are brand new, so they don't know that it is depression or PTSD. Right? That's a big thing. And then we had a huge conversation about transitioning veterans, because once you go from this very structured, what you're going to do every day, every single minute of your day is detailed, to, okay, you're on the other side of the gates, figure it out. And then somewhere in the middle of that, they put you in a 1-week class where they inundate you with information. And then they tell you, okay, best of luck. We gave you all the resources. We got a lot of veterans, that transitioning veterans, that are, man, I don't know, should I go to school? Should I do this? And they've lost their purpose. I mean, that was really the best way to describe it, right? The purpose is gone. The light is out of their eyes. They're sitting around. Now they're staring at the bottle. And from that, as you're fully aware, things spiral and go south. And we want to get ahead of the bottle part and the feeling bad part. So I'm going to ask you this. When it comes to Sophros, Randall Thomas doesn't know that he needs help, but he knows he's not feeling well. Who's the prime target? Who for them to reach out to you? Like, at what point do you think it's the right move for a veteran or non-veteran to be like, something doesn't feel right? I heard about this Sophros place. Maybe they're the right fit for me. How do I know?
I always tell people, people often ask me, how do I know if I have a problem? That's a question I get all the time, right? Or we get, I should say. Very rarely do people without a problem ask themselves that. So if you're asking yourself, hey, like, I wonder if I have a problem, or like, man, I don't know how to get ahead of this, and I've tried 5 ways, and I've tried limiting my drinking to the weekends, and I've tried, only drinking on Friday and Saturday. Like, I keep making these agreements. I'm only going to drink beer. I make these agreements with myself and I keep breaking them, and start to affect my life. If you start to feel like your emotions and your feelings are starting to like spiral down, call somebody. It's always better to do it sooner rather than later. And so, if someone calls us, like, my goal is not to admit you. My goal is to like find out what's going on. And if we're appropriate, then sure. But the worst thing that can happen if you call us, for example, is we'll like give you some recommendations or something, which you then have the choice whether to take, And so I always say, just make the phone call. And if somebody's not the right fit for us, like, we'll help them find what that is, and maybe it's just maybe you just need to go to some meetings, or maybe you need to talk to a therapist a little bit, or maybe you need to come to our program. But like, we're not gonna stop until like you feel comfortable with whatever solution you've got. Like, we'll follow up.
So just, if they're not feeling well, make the call, and then determine from there the best appropriate action. Maybe that's at Sophros and maybe that's somewhere else, but you guys are willing to obviously take the call, make sure to help them get ahead of whatever's going on, and then put them in the right place to get things back on track.
Yeah. Worst case, you get a free consult with somebody and they give you some advice, and you can then take it or not, but it's another data point for you.
Yep. Okay. And then, speaking of, you said free consult, funding this thing, vets might not have access to TRICARE anymore, or maybe they haven't selected their VA benefits. Maybe they're in limbo. For people who go through the Sophros model, is this you need to have insurance, or is there like a grant that covers a part of the cost? How does that normally work?
Yeah. So most of our clients have insurance of some type. We're in network with pretty much everybody, all the big players. So everybody from Florida Blue, Aetna, Cigna, UHC, Optum, VA, TRICARE, you name it, we can accept it, right? And if you don't have insurance, we can still talk about it. And we do some sliding scale stuff for people. If they have low income, we can work with them. And if it doesn't work out, for whatever reason, we'll find somewhere they can.
It's great. So there really shouldn't be a barrier to entry here. That's essentially what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
they should call you. Okay. You famously, or maybe it's not famous, maybe I'm the only one that sees it or notices it, in your tagline or in your headline on LinkedIn, you put that you're actively in recovery. or you're still the job's not complete, right? You had to go through rehab a couple of times. You've built a couple of centers here to help other people with addiction, but for you, you still are taking this day by day.
For
What
sure.
walk us through that? Why is it so important to make sure that people are aware of that? How important is it to know that the person that's running this clinic is somebody that's gone through this themselves? That part of your life, I know it's a big piece of who you are. Why is it important that we're so public about it?
What I found when I started telling people about this was a couple things happened. One, people came to me and they're like, "Oh man, I'm kind of struggling too. Like, what do you think I should do?" And so being honest and open about it gave me the opportunity to have an influence on other people, which was awesome. And two, it protects my sobriety. There are people all throughout Jacksonville that know I'm in recovery. So if I'm down at BW and I decide to order a whiskey, like, I'm going to be watching over my shoulder every second. Now, it doesn't mean I can't relapse, but it's another, tool in my toolkit. It's another thing that keeps me from doing stupid things, right? And I found that, the big concern is, oh, like, people are going to judge me. Well, people judged me when I had a problem. Well, that's when I got judged. When I was out there doing stupid things and making bad decisions, and like, that's when I was getting judged. And, rightfully so, not rightfully so, not completely wrongly so, we'll say. Um, you know, but people don't seem to judge when you're in recovery. They're like, oh, cool. Like, you're doing something that's hard. Like, and they're thinking to themselves, oh, it'd be hard for me not to have a couple glasses of wine at night. That's impressive what you're doing. So what I found is that, once you start doing the work and once you start doing that, it really changes people's perception of you, but not in a bad way. It's in a good way. And as far as, working a program, at the beginning of my sobriety, I really resented that. I'm like, I can go for 30 days. I can fix this. And I tried that once and it didn't work. And then I'm like, I can go for 30 days. I can fix this plus this. And then I'm pretty much done. Didn't work again. And so what I realized is I have to do some constant work, and I resented that, but I'm now at the point where most of what I'm working on is me. I'm like devoting, I don't know, 10 hours a week to becoming a better version of myself, which helps me as a partner for my fiance. It helps me as a business leader. It helps me as a family member to my family. It helps me in every way, right? So it's not wasted time that I spend going to these meetings. It's not like if I don't go to my meeting tomorrow morning at 8, I'm not going to head to the liquor store. Like, that's not where I'm at, right? But if I don't head to that meeting at 8, am I going to be the best partner to my fiance that day? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I needed to get something off my chest, or get some advice from somebody else. And so it's just constant work, but it's all part of my life now. It's just kind of who I am.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I've not publicly said this, but I also do the work. I have a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a heart-centered leadership coach that I meet with. And I mean, I feel like you hit the nail on the head, which is, if I miss those meetings, would I go like spiral into a depressive episode? No. But am I able to talk to a non-biased third-party person about the things that are going on in my life and making sure that I'm handling them appropriately and compartmentalizing them the way I should? 100%. So I'm with you, man. I think what you're doing, I've made no secret about this. I think what you're doing is outstanding. The only thing I don't like is that you were Army and not Navy, but it is what it is, right? We're not all perfect.
I love it. It's a tough town to be in as an Army guy.
Yeah, it really is. We're 4 years into this. So I'm sure there's stories. I don't want to call them failures, but maybe things that didn't work out the way that we wanted them to, right? We provided all the access and we did everything we could to help somebody out. Maybe it didn't work, but I would like to talk about success stories. We don't have to give names or information, but in the 4 years of doing this, I don't think you would be so spirited and so passionate about opening up other opportunities in different parts of the state if things weren't going well. So what are some of the great scenarios that have taken place the last 4 years that you would plant your flag on and say, like, man, I'm really proud of this?
Yeah. I mean, one of our first clients came in and he was, just about done, a military guy. And last I talked to him, he's now got 2.5 years of sobriety and, back with his partner and like thriving, and we've got other people who, went through the program and they've got a year and now they're working at a treatment facility and they're helping other people. The number of people that have said, I don't think I'd be here anymore if it wasn't for the experience that I had. And like, I don't take credit. We don't take credit for that, for keeping them alive, but we were a part of that puzzle. We were a part. We were, just like a corner man in boxing doesn't win the fight for you, but sure nice to have a good one, And I just every time somebody tells me that they're leading a meeting, or when we've had two clients bring smart recovery meetings, which are kind of like AA meetings. They bring them to the center and they're like, hey, can I do a smart recovery meeting on Tuesday nights? And I want to lead it. And I did the training and I'm like, absolutely. Which room do you want? But to see people that are, getting their lives back, getting their partners back, they're a father to their children now, they're a mother to their children now, they're employed and doing well. It's just so exciting to see. And, like you said, make no mistake, this disease wants to kill us, and we've lost people. We have a memorial on our wall at the office that's got a star for everyone we've lost. And it's not empty. So, we're thinking, if you're out there thinking and you're struggling, well, this is going to be okay. It's like, it might be, it might not be. If we don't put in the work, it can go downhill real quick. And so, but it can also spiral up just as fast. So we've seen a lot of that, and it's just such a blessing.
I'm glad you said that last part, because that was my next question. You mentioned there was a guy that said, like, I'm done. Like, I've lived all the life I can live. Like, this is too much. It's too painful. And now you use the word thriving. And so I would, from your mouth, how would you, for anybody who's feeling exactly like he was feeling, like, man, there's just no way this could get better. And even if it got a little bit better, I'm never going to feel okay. I'm never going to be happy. But you've seen people on the other side of that. So what would you say to those people that are really struggling right now to have them have a little bit of hope and just, put their arm out and let somebody grab their hand and help them out?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I was there as well. So there were a couple days in 2018 when I was deciding if this was the last day that I was going to be here, and it was close. And so I've been there as well. And I'm like the happiest I've ever been now. Not to say there are bad days. We all have bad days, right? But I look forward to going to work every day. I've got a wonderful relationship. Like, I'm happy. And if you had told me that was going to be the case in 2018, I wasn't ready to believe you, but it's kind of nice to be able to have people that have been there tell you, because they get a little more credibility, right? What I always tell people is, if you feel like that and you feel like there's no hope, then you've got nothing to lose by giving it a shot. Like, give it a shot. Like, if you still feel this way after you've given it a shot and like fix some of these problems, then you can, think about whether or not that's the right decision for you. But until you've given it a real shot, or given it another shot or whatever, I always tell people, it's when we get to that point, we think what we're saying is, I don't want to live anymore. And I think what so many of us are really saying is, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so if you don't want to live like this anymore, yes, that's an option, but it's also an option to change what this is, right? And it's a slow process. It takes time, but man, I've seen so many people do it that I believe anybody can.
I mean, that's never thought of it like that, but it's so poetic. I mean, if you already feel like this, then what do you have to lose? Nothing. It's incredible, man. I'm glad I asked. Thank you. Kind of curious. We've been doing this Jacksonville thing for 4 years, and this is a Jacksonville-based podcast. And I like to ask people what Jacksonville's doing well. We're a transformative city. We're going through a lot of change right now, but you've seen success in your endeavor, and so I'd love to kind of spread the word about what Jacksonville's doing well. When you really put some thought into it, how is Jacksonville in terms of a support system for a nonprofit such as yourself?
And just to clarify, we're not a nonprofit, but we are doing great work. So just to clarify, but didn't want to take that credit. But I think, what I've seen from Jacksonville is like I mentioned, I've seen the Navy doing really good things here in Jacksonville. I've seen the hospitals. We have some amazing hospital systems here, all the way from, Mayo and Baptist, but even down to Shands in Gainesville, which is not Jacksonville, but they support a lot of our people. The hospitals have really done a lot to support people, and they're trying. I think that one of the things that I'm hoping is that the city gets a little more vibrant, like recovery culture, or we'll just say this, non-drinking culture. Not to say that there can't be a drinking culture. A lot of people can enjoy that healthily and like good for them. But like in Tampa, for example, there are a couple organizations I know of that have like all these events that are fun over town and like, they're just non-drinking events, but they're, you know, ranging from pickleball to, indoor rock climbing to whatever. And it's a much more vibrant culture. And I'd love to be a part of that at some point, helping build that if I can. So that's something I think we could do better. Yeah. I mean, I think we've got some amazing clinicians in town. So like therapists, I think our therapy, infrastructure, which is largely like UNF driven, they graduate a lot of really great therapists every year. So that's nice as well. And then there's a bunch of nonprofits doing good things like recovery housing. And yeah, there's good nonprofits doing stuff as well.
I'm with you. I think we're trending. I do, because I've been here 18 years. I know you said you're from here, so you'll feel this more than I have. But this has been a very traditional city, very legacy city. The churches have run the city, so there's been some real bumpers that have been placed on this city in terms of what we can think and what we can explore. And I think with some of the evolution that's taken place, both physically in this city, that just seems like there is a mindset shift that we're at least having these conversations.
For sure.
At least.
We weren't when I was growing up here.
Yeah. And I know that we weren't, like I said, as recent as 2017. Listen, let's see what the next 10 years do. And maybe by the time we have you back on, this city's a thriving, healthful, certain pockets or soberest, if you will, type of city.
I love it.
Yeah. What about Sophros have I missed? What have I not covered? I'm sure that there's something out there that from our first conversation I've forgotten to mention here.
I don't know if I mentioned this. I mean, I mentioned it briefly, but I think, Sophros and recovery in general, like the approach that we take is this toolkit approach, and so for me, there are all these different modalities that people talk about, these different like methods of therapy, and one of them is if I have an unhealthy thought, I need to reframe that into a healthy thought. I need to kind of test it out, do the pros and cons, figure it out, which is an amazing tool. It's a big one we use. At the same time, if I'm really heated, if I'm a 9 out of 10 in cravings or emotions or depression or whatever it might be, I'm not going to be able to have that logical thought process with myself. And so I need another set of tools. Those are what we call DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And that's really just about accepting what is and then also accepting something else. And so that's another tool. And then mindfulness, right? How do I be present in this moment non-judgmentally? Got to learn that tool too, right? And so it's not about this one size fits all thing. It's that life brings us into different situations and we're going to encounter different things, and we've got to have a tool for it. Like if you were building a house and all you have was a hammer is a great tool, very important. Also not the only tool you need. And so that's really how we look at it. And I think, if my relationships are unhealthy, I'm going to be unhealthy. So I got to fix those too. So it's a bunch, but we work on it. And, I work on it every day for myself as well. I appreciate it. Yeah. Sometimes better than others, but that's why it's one day at a time for all of us. I feel like we've covered a lot. I really enjoy and appreciate the chance to come on and, share my story and a little bit about Sophros. If anybody's in the same boat and, they want to talk to somebody, like just reach out. Even if you don't reach out to us, I don't care. Reach out to somebody. So our phone number is 904-440-1479. You can just find us online at sophrosrecovery.com. It's SOPHROS. And just call the number and we'll get you to the right person. So everybody on our team's ready to help. I appreciate it. Thanks for what you do, Randall.